Hello, Pancake Nation, and welcome back to the podcast. By the way, if you've already watched the OnlyFacts video episode about Jeong on my main channel, this isn't a straight reread of that script. We're going a bit deeper here. We're going to talk about the new Japanese interview they just did, Jungkook's recent Weverse cooking live, and how all of that fits into this whole Jeong and JiKook conversation. If you like hearing these deep dives into JiKook news and memories with a heavy emphasis on facts and documentation, please subscribe to the channel. We're really close to hitting that 1K subs number, which would be a huge milestone for us. So big, in fact, that my co-host on He's a JiKooker has promised a face reveal if that happens. Okay, so let's begin. Today we are going to talk a bit about the Korean word that has been doing a lot of heavy lifting in the discourse around Jimin and Jungkook at the moment, and that word is Jeong. Recently, a YouTube creator put out a whole video arguing that because Jimin and Jungkook share Jeong, that proves there's nothing romantic happening between them. It's just a deep cultural bond, just friendship, end of story. She didn't mention any other ships at all, just JiKook. So there is a reason to think that they were singled out. If you watched my OnlyFacts video on this, you'll know I strongly disagree with that conclusion. So this episode is a longer, nerdier, hopefully not too much more rambly podcast version. But we're also, like I said, going to dig into some other bits and how that affects this whole conversation. Why Jeong doesn't cancel out romance, what it really is, and how this connects to the Are You Sure To main trailer that's released, and the Japanese promos that are happening right now. Quick reminder before we dive in, I am responding to an idea. I am not attacking any person. Please do not send hate or harassment to any other creator. At any time, actually, even if you think they're wrong, we do not do that here. Our community here is based on kindness. All right, grab a mug of tea. I've got my notebook here, brain on. Let's talk Jeong. So background first. In the run-up to Are You Sure Season 2, there's been a spike in people trying to explain Jimin and Jungkook's dynamic in what we'll call culturally safe ways. For years, we've had, it's just fan service, it's just skinship, and now there's this new layer that's emerging, it's just Jeong. The video I mentioned leans heavily on Korean friends explaining Jeong as this deep, familiar attachment. The conclusion is basically, because Jeong is a normal part of Korean relationships, you can have Jeong with friends and coworkers, and JiKook's closeness is not romantic. It's just Jeong. I get why that sounds convincing at first. It is culture, it's got context, it's got nuance to it. The problem is it's leaving out half the story. Let's do some definitions first. Jeong is one of those words that doesn't translate neatly into English. Korean writers and cross-cultural writers have often described it as a deep and emotional bond or attachment. There's a heavy emphasis that it develops over time through shared experience, care, and loyalty. It's that sense of, this is my person in the softest way. You want to protect them. You don't want to be parted from them. There's a joined feeling, a we-ness to it. Importantly, Jeong is not restricted to one type of relationship. Absolutely, you can have it with your family. Or not, as Thanksgiving's coming up, depending on your family member. You can have it with an old friend or with a community, and absolutely you can have it with a partner or a spouse, or at least we'd hope so in a healthy relationship. Some Korean writers even have called it a special kind of love or a warm-hearted affection. It's definitely something that binds people together. So the key idea is this. Jeong is a word that describes the depth and the quality of a bond. It is not an official label. It tells you that two people are deeply attached. It does not tell you whether they're just friends or whether they are definitely not lovers. As I've said before, if you imagine love as the spark, Jeong is the warmth that builds from years of tending the fire together. It is exactly the kind of word that you would expect to be used to describe a long-term, healthy, deep, loving relationship, especially including romantic ones. So this is where the argument goes wrong. The logic in the video, paraphrased, is Jeong is a big part of Korean culture. People can have Jeong with friends, family, co-workers, etc. Therefore, if two people have Jeong, it means they're close, but it also means they're not romantic. And points 1 and 2 are fine. Jeong is important in Korea. It's everywhere in Korean relationships. The issue is point 3. There is nothing in the definition that says this bond cannot exist inside a romantic relationship. In fact, long-term couples often describe a shift from early butterflies into that deep, settled, everyday love, which would be described as Jeong. So therefore, when someone says they have Jeong, therefore they're not romantic, what they would actually be saying is they have love and loyalty, therefore they're not partners. And that just doesn't make sense. So there's another fun twist here. If you say they just have Jeong, it's nothing unusual, you are already admitting their bond is deep, long-lasting, emotionally significant, and they are attached in a way that's hard to break. That is literally what Jeong describes, a connection that you do not want to sever, that makes you want to keep doing things for and with that person, even when it's not convenient. We'll throw in military service here. None of that contradicts a romantic reading. If anything, that sounds exactly like the baseline that you would want between healthy life partners. So the real question is not, is it Jeong or romance? The real question is there evidence that this deep and enduring bond also includes romantic and or sexual attraction? And for the people who believe in JiKook, that there's more there than just a friendship, the answer is yes, based on patterns over time, the physical intimacy, the tenderness, the consistent prioritizing of each other on camera and off, and the way they keep showing up in each other's lives, even outside of group schedules. Jeong is the floor, not the ceiling of the relationship. Now I want to zoom out because this is where it gets uncomfortable, and I'll hold your hand when I say it. Over and over with K-pop ships, we see this pattern. First, everyone admits the relationship is unusually close. I'm not just talking about JiKook here. There are other examples within other groups as well. Then cultural concepts like skinship, fan service, or Jeong are used to explain why it is still, quote unquote, just friends. And any romantic reading is framed as delusional, rude, or not understanding Korean culture. I am absolutely 100% or more in favor of the cultural context. That is why we are here talking about Jeong in the first place. We want to understand the culture and what's going on. But we have to be honest about how it is being used. When we take a beautiful, wide concept like Jeong and use it specifically to shut down the possibility of a queer relationship, that starts to feel like a very soft, no homo move. Even if the people who are doing it do not intend any harm. I'm not calling anyone homophobic. I don't know creators' hearts. I don't know your hearts. I'm talking about a pattern that we see in the fandom and other fandoms. Queer readings are consistently explained away. Straight possibilities are always left open as maybe. It's heteronormativity, isn't it? It's They're straight until they tell us otherwise, always shutting down the possibility that there could be something else. The bar for saying, quote unquote, they might be queer is set impossibly high. Why does anyone need to come out at all? Why can't we just look at the behavior as it is and accept that? Straight people don't need to come out. And that is extra uncomfortable in an industry where idols are often allowed or even encouraged to act very queer-coded for fan service. But the idea that they might actually be queer in real life makes some people furious. As a queer person and a queer supportive fan, that can feel like erasing. It feels like there is never a scenario where a same-sex bond will ever be allowed to be romantic or accepted as romantic, no matter how intense it looks. So let's talk about the Are You Sure Season 2 main trailer now, because this is where the Jeong discourse and marketing collide. A new article about the Are You Sure 2 main trailer literally headlines it with how romantic the journey feels. It describes Jimin and Jungkook's teasing a youth-filled romantic journey together and quotes them standing under a star-filled sky saying, "This feels so romantic." At the same time, in the official synopsis, the series is now described as the quote-unquote friendship travels of Jimin and Jungkook. It's framed as a Disney Plus travel show chronicling their friendship trip right after discharge. So we have two simultaneous languages. The marketing language of friendship travel and BTS's bond. The actual words on screen, "This feels so romantic." Some people have jumped on the friendship description in the new trailer and said, oh, look, see, the company is walking it back. They saw the Jeong discourse online, and they're trying to emphasize now that it's just friendship. Realistically, no. Production, editing, subtitle approval, marketing copy, global press releases, all of that was locked in months before a random YouTube discourse spike in the topic of Jeong and JiKook. What is much more likely is that internally they have always pitched Are You Sure as a friendship travel show, because that's the safe, marketable label. At the same time, everyone can see the romantic vibe. So lines like, "This feels so romantic," are left in the show and even highlighted in the headlines. So rather than being a walk back in response to anything, it looks more like the same balancing act we have seen for years. Officially, friendship, textually and emotionally, very romantic. Anyone who's seen Bon Voyage 3, it says there right on the screen, star, wind, romance. This is nothing new. And again, Jeong fits perfectly into that picture. It is the word for the deep, enduring attachment that they have. It does not negate a romantic feeling. It's something that sits underneath it. Okay, so now I also want to talk about the Japanese promo that just aired on the Mezamashi TV, because it gave us another one of those tiny, of course, moments that JiKook seemed to collect. In the interview, they asked Jimin what kind of new hobby he'd like to take up in the future, and he says he wants to get better at cooking. The interviewer asks, so what dish would you like to make? And Jimin says, pasta. The host immediately points at Jungkook and basically says, well, you already have a teacher right there, don't you? Jimin just laughs and says he'll do his best. Now hold that in your mind and line it up with what Jungkook was doing on Weverse literally just yesterday. So he's on live in his kitchen making shrimp pasta with millions of people watching. And this is, of course, not the first time he's made pasta for us. He talks about how much he likes pasta and starts planning future cooking lives, calling them Let's Cook, and talking about coming back to make dojan curry pasta next time. He's reading pasta suggestions, joking about flavors, currently enjoying the whole domestic chef vibe, which he is so good at. So on one side, we have Jimin on Japanese television saying, "I'd like to cook. I want to learn to make pasta," while the host gestures to Jungkook as his cooking teacher. On the other side, we have Jungkook at home, building an accidental little cooking series out of pasta lives and asking ARMY what kind of pasta he should experiment with next. Is it proof in and of itself? There are a couple, of course not. Of course not. But it is another one of those patterns that keep stacking up, the way their answers and interests keep circling on the same themes at the same time, almost looking as if they're in response to each other. The way the outside interviews and private lives keep quietly lining up. It fits a bigger picture that we've been talking about, that this bond looks long-term, domestic, shared life level. I didn't say romantic there. I said domestic and shared life. It's a kind of connection where I want to learn how to cook pasta and I'm doing a whole streak of pasta cooking lives starts to feel a little less like random coincidences and more like two halves of the same story. So one more thing that's emerged since the Jeong video dropping, and its fandom critique of that framing. There are JiKook friendly bloggers and commentators out there pushing back on the whole "it's just Jeong so they're brothers" narrative, which is good to see. The argument from that side is basically Jeong is oversimplified in this case into just sibling love. And by doing that, it flattens out all the nuance of both the word itself and JiKook's relationship. It becomes a tool to force a very specific, non-queer reading on something that honestly looks a lot like a couple. Say what you like, whether you believe JiKook are actually romantic or not. Would you be so upset if you ended up with a life partner where your relationship was that level of Jeong? So some queer fans have also pointed out that queer people can't queerbait. If a pair is queer or potentially queer, and they are just being themselves on camera, that is not fan service, that is not bait, that's just their relationship. And again, if we love Jimin and Jungkook and believe that they are good-hearted, honest people, then accusing them of pretending or baiting or lying is beyond disrespectful. So again, Jeong fits inside that whole relationship thing. If Jimin and Jungkook are, in fact, some sort of queer couple, then of course they would share Jeong, just like any other couple would share Jeong. Years of shared history and affection do not evaporate because romance is present. They deepen. It is really nice to see people speaking out about this and pushing back on the erasure of queer people within the fandom, within the K-pop industry, and certainly pushing back on the idea that Jimin and Jungkook are being dishonest all the time, that they're living their entire life as just some big fan service show. Just don't. If you love them, just don't. Doesn't matter whether you believe they're romantic or not, but do not accuse them of spending their entire lives putting on fan service specifically to cater to certain parts of the fandom. So let's pull this whole thing together. Does this whole Jeong argument strengthen the case for JiKook actually being a romantic couple? We have a Korean concept, Jeong, that describes a deep, long-lasting attachment between people, a very, very bond, a we-ness to it. We have a trailer now that literally has them say, this feels so romantic, while the official synopsis says friendship travel. We have Japanese promos that are highlighting them as this close domestic duo, reminiscing over their post-military trip and talking about how their interests intertwine with this whole cooking and domestic vibe going on. We have years of very couple-coded behavior that do not vanish just because a YouTuber, a marketing exec, a copywriter tries to slap cultural or marketing language on top of something. Look at how the two of them act and interact with each other. That is where the truth in any relationship lies. Not in what other people say about it, but in how they look at each other and how they act with each other. So if you put all of that together, tossing a label like Jeong out does not weaken the case for JiKook at all. If anything, it strengthens it, because it emphasizes the fact that what we are looking at is not a fling, it's not some single moment, it's not one suspicious hand on a hip back in 2017. We are looking at a long, slow, deeply intertwined journey of these two beautiful souls. The kind of journey where Jeong would absolutely grow. The kind where this feels so romantic slips out when they are standing under a foreign star-filled sky together and no one edits it out. So when someone says, oh, they just have Jeong, what I hear is they have a deep, enduring, emotionally significant attachment that feels like it will never quite break. And my little JiKook believing heart goes, yes, exactly. That's the point. I want to finish, I just kind of want to circle back to respect here. We are all outsiders. We do not know the full truth of Jimin and Jungkook's relationship. We probably never will. And that's okay. People are allowed to disagree with me. You do not have to see JiKook as a couple. You can still watch Are You Sure and experience it as the beautiful travel show, friendship travel show that it is being marketed as, and that is absolutely valid. What I'm pushing back against today is the idea that invoking this cultural term like Jeong automatically shuts down any queer reading. And you can substitute in there fan service or skinship as well, because queer people will also be doing fan service if they're idols, and they will also be doing skinship if they're idols. That does not automatically make them not queer, and that using those terms to shut down a queer reading is absolutely disrespectful. That's not how language works. This is not how queerness works, okay? Jeong is a beautiful word for this depth of bond. It belongs in all kinds of relationships, including romantic ones. Using it to flatten and police our interpretation of two very complex, very real human beings, this is where I will step in and say, no, we can do better than that. For me, calling what Jungkook and Jimin share as just Jeong, it doesn't debunk anything. It just gives me another word to use to describe what many people already believe is there. If you have made it this far in the podcast, thank you for listening to me nerding out about language and terms and feelings. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really help if you could subscribe to the podcast, give it a thumbs up, and certainly share it with another JiKooker you know who likes a deep dive. If you want to see the visual version of this, there is more to it in the Only Facts video on my main channel, and also the previous episode of the podcast, which goes far deeper into the actual linguistics case for this. All of them will, again, re-emphasize the theme that these cultural terms this cultural term of Jeong just strengthens the case for JiKook. The links are all in the show notes, along with my Patreon, where you can read all my JiKook fiction stories, if you like a good male-male romance, and join a very kind, very mature JiKook community. Again, if you like the podcast, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to us. Thank you for listening, and may all your relationships be blessed with just a little more Jeong today. I love you. I purple you. Sarangae.